Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all participants in this webinar, preparing for the open-ended working group on conventional ammunition. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Paul Holtham, and I'll be your moderator for the first day of this two-day webinar. Please do join us all at the same time tomorrow for day two. I'm the head of the Program for Conventional Arms and Ammunition at the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, or UNIDIR for short. UNIDIR is an independent and autonomous institute within the United Nations, focusing on disarmament and international security related issues. Our goal is to assist the international community to develop practical and innovative ideas that we think are needed to find solutions to today's and tomorrow's critical security problems and challenges. Now, I've already had, in preparing for this meeting, some problems with technology. We need technology to conduct these activities and to reach a broad audience, but technology is not perfect, and therefore we've put in some places to deal with disruptions. We're confident that this is a secure platform, and all participants have joined using unique personalized links. But should this virtual platform be compromised, we'll close it down and we'll launch a new meeting on Zoom. New access links will be emailed to you immediately, and we should be able to resume the event within 5 to 10 minutes. Now, this is just a backup measure, and I'm confident we will not have to resort to it. I've been reliably informed we have more than 200 registrations for this webinar, with participants representing member states from various geographic regions, different UN agencies, international and regional organizations, as well as non-governmental organizations in the private sector. We think this not only shows the wide multi-stakeholder nature of the problem at hand, but also points to interests comprehensively to find a solution to the issue. Participants joining as attendees will have their cameras and microphones turned off by design, so please don't worry if you cannot put yourself on screen at this stage. This is to accommodate the large number of participants that are joining us today. However, we will have an active question and answer session today, and you can find at the bottom of the screen the Q&A button. Please use this to post your questions at any time during the event. So whether it's the first, second, or third panelist that has sparked your interest, please do not hesitate to use this function throughout the event. And as time permits, I'll relay these questions from the floor to specific panelists. So please indicate to whom your question is addressed, unless you think it can be addressed by all panelists. And please, if you so wish, include your name and affiliation. As always with these events, time is a constraint, and therefore, should any of the questions that you posed go unanswered, UNIDIR will follow up with the panelists and will provide you with a response bilaterally after the event. So apologies in advance if this is not possible during today's session. Now, we're gathering as a community here today because we understand there's a pressing need to support and enhance thinking on safe, secure, and sustainable through-life ammunition management, and to do this at the national, sub-regional, regional, and global levels. Inadequately managed ammunition poses a significant risk to civilians, as well as to infrastructures and surrounding environments, and ineffectively managed stockpiles and accidental explosions have resulted over recent decades in the destruction of livelihoods and communities in several member states. Now, in addition to the immediate threat posed by accidental explosions, diversion of such material to criminal and terrorist groups can significantly contribute to increasing levels of violence, conflict, and insecurity around the globe. And in this scenario, the role played by the open-ended working group on conventional ammunition in elaborating a set of political commitments as a new global framework that will address existing gaps in through-life management of ammunition is of crucial importance in reducing armed violence and saving lives. Today's event, we're confident, will contribute to these efforts by supporting the preparations for the open-ended working group on conventional ammunition that meets this year in 2022 and next year in 2023. We hope we can enhance thinking and prompt dialogue on key aspects of ammunition management. And I think that's enough from me in terms of a scene setter. We have three excellent panelists that I'm sure will guide you through the United Nations process on conventional ammunition management. But first, I have the privilege of introducing Mr. Albrecht von Wittke, head of the Conventional Arms Control and Confidence and Security Building Measures Division of the German Federal Foreign Office. The Federal Foreign Office generously supports the work of the Institute, making our research on conventional arms and ammunition issues possible. So with that, Mr. von Wittke, I'd like to turn the screen over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from Germany to all of the colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to thank UNIDIR and its Conventional Arms and Ammunition Program for organizing this set of webinars. I consider both of them an important contribution to preparations for the first substantive session of the open-ended working group on conventional ammunition that is to take place in about 1 month from now, from the 23rd to 27th of May in New York. Additionally, I'm really grateful for UNIDIR's important work over the past years to help the international community get to grips with the problems it faces with regard to conventional ammunition and their causes, and in particular for its support for the UN process on conventional ammunition, both in the GGE and in preparation for the open-ended working group, and their important input and events for this. Ineffective conventional ammunition management is a growing concern for the international community. On the one hand, ammunition diverted to unauthorized users, including criminal and terrorist groups, facilitates, fuels, and accelerates armed conflict and armed violence. On the other hand, unplanned explosions of ammunition severely affect civilian population, infrastructure, and the environment. Despite the severity of this dual risk, conventional ammunition has long lacked a comprehensive, dedicated process at the global multilateral level. The convening of the open-ended working group on conventional ammunition provides an important opportunity to close this gap and to comprehensively address both the safety and security challenges related to through-life management of conventional ammunition. We, the open-ended working group, have the advantage of building on a foundation laid by 2 groups of governmental experts, or GGEs, in 2008 and 2020 and 21 that have made important assessments and recommendations. Inter alia, building on that work, our open-ended working group has been mandated by the General Assembly with the important task to address existing gaps in through-life management of conventional ammunition and to elaborate a set of political commitments as a new global framework that in turn is supposed to be part of a comprehensive multi-layer framework on conventional ammunition. The webinars today and tomorrow will give insights into the UN process on conventional ammunition so far, research findings from consultations with a diverse range of stakeholders, and they will present relevant ammunition management experiences from the ground. The latest GGE on conventional ammunition was led by my predecessor as head of division for conventional arms control at the DFFO, Markus Bleinroth, and I'm very happy that he is here with us today to share insights into the process and the recommendations of the GGE. I'm also very much delighted that stakeholders from various fields, international organizations, industry experts, civil society, and academia are sharing their perspectives with us today and tomorrow. After a set of briefings, each day a Q&A session is foreseen, which I invite you to actively make use of. What is important, the webinars are not here to teach you. Their aim is to point to work undertaken so far, share research findings and practical experiences to stimulate the thinking of our open-ended working group on key issues and processes pertaining to the safe and secure management of conventional ammunition. As I have informed member states in my latest letter that was shared by UNODA on 14th of April, the next informal consultation will take place virtually next week on Thursday, 28th of April at 9 a.m. New York time. The aim of that informal consultation is to share updates on preparations, to exchange views on the revised provisional program of work, as well as to outline my plans with regard to subject matter briefings during the first substantive session. Additional informal consultations are planned ahead of the first substantive session at the end of May. Together with my team, I plan to arrive some days earlier in New York to again allow for informal in-person consultations, also in a bilateral format, ahead of the first substantive session. Finally, let me wish all of you present 2 interesting and stimulating days with new insights and perspectives. I'm confident that these webinars will contribute greatly to our preparations for the first substantive session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. van Witke, for your opening remarks. It's a great privilege and honor for us today to be joined not just by the chair of the open-ended working group, but also by the chair of the last group of governmental experts. So a real honor and a benefit, I think, to all the participants that join us today, and an excellent start, I think, to the first day of our two-day webinar. And I'd like to echo your encouragement for active discussion to support the open-ended working group process during today's and tomorrow's webinars. And with that, I think it's time to turn to the panel. We've had an excellent setup from Mr. van Witke. We have a total of 3 interventions from a panel today. Each presentation will last around 50 minutes, so leaving plenty of time for questions, answers, and discussion. The first intervention will be delivered by Ms. Nora Algaya. Ms. Algaya has recently rejoined the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs Conventional Arms Branch as a political affairs officer. Prior to holding this position, she served as a program management officer at the Department of Peace Operations DDR section within the UN Office of Rule and Law and Security Institutions, and as an associate political affairs officer previously with the Office for Disarmament Affairs Conventional Arms Branch. During her career in the disarmament domain, she's also worked with the Geneva Disarmament Platform, the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, as well as supporting UN women's efforts in India as a protection analyst promoting the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And following that introduction of a tremendous career so far, Ms. Algaya, the screen is yours, and we look forward to hearing more about the history of the ammunition process under UN auspices.
Thank you very much, Paul, for the kind introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. As Paul mentioned, my name is Nora Algaya, and I'm with the Conventional Arms Branch of the Office for Disarmament Affairs. Thank you very much to UNIDIR for organizing this webinar in preparation of the open-ended working group on conventional ammunition. I was kindly invited to provide an overview of multilateral discussions on conventional ammunition under UN auspices over the past decades. Next slide, please. In doing so, I will briefly highlight the unique challenges posed by conventional ammunition and that have already been outlined by speakers in opening remarks. Based on this understanding, I would outline the historical relationship with the issue of small arms and early discussion on ammunition. I will say a few words on how the Security Council has addressed weapons and ammunition issues, and then move to the General Assembly and its actions on problems arising from the accumulation of conventional ammunition stockpiles and surplus. And this will lead us then to the 2008 group of governmental experts and the more recent 2020-2021 GGE. Finally, I will briefly touch upon the recently established open-ended working group on conventional ammunition, which will convene in 2022 and 2023. And just to note that this presentation is based on a paper that was developed by the Secretariat in 2020 in preparation of the second GGE, and which can be found under the document symbol GGE/PACA/2020/2. Next slide, please. Let me start by saying a few words on the safety and security issues. The unique challenges posed by conventional ammunition are due to the explosive nature, as you all know, and this explosive nature and this tendency to instability requires rigorous storage procedure to prevent explosion. And also due to the explosive nature, that makes ammunition very attractive for the manufacture of improvised explosive devices. So due to the potential of unplanned explosions on the one hand and diversion to the illicit market on the other, many states consider addressing safety and security of ammunition stockpiles as a priority. Nevertheless, there has been no comprehensive or consistent global action until now on the issue since it was first raised in connection with small arms in the 1990s. And this leads us to the historical relationship on the next slide, please. If we look at the historical evolution on how the issue of small arms was considered in the UN, this has had an impact on multilateral discussions on conventional ammunition. While the linkage between small arms and ammunition is logic and clear, this connection has hindered progress towards addressing conventional ammunition more broadly at the multilateral level. Until recently, discussions have focused mostly on small arms and light weapons ammunition, and progress on other categories of ammunition has been limited. If we go to the start, the international community began to consider challenges posed by small arms and light weapons in the late 1990s, also with a focus on the relationship between small arms and light weapons and their ammunition. In 1997, the panel of governmental experts on small arms concluded that ammunition formed an integral part of small arms, and that the availability of ammunition was an important independent element, since the weapon would be rendered useless without its ammunition. Following the recommendation of the panel of governmental experts, the SG prepared a comprehensive study on all aspects of problems of ammunition and explosive with the assistance of the group of experts in 1999. And that group of experts concluded that measures to control small arms and light weapons would not be complete if they did not include measures to control ammunition and explosive. So the link was made very clear in the 1990s. Following this work on the expert level, discussions on ammunition were largely held in the context of the negotiation of the program of action on small arms and light weapons in 2001, and then the subsequent adoption of the international tracing instrument in 2005. As we all know, there is no explicit reference to small arms ammunition in either of the documents, but a compromise was found by mentioning small arms and light weapons in all its aspects in the full title of the program of action. If we now fast forward to 2018, the outcome document of the review conference of the POA for the first time included 2 references to ammunition, which were subject to a request for vote. And then if we move even more forward to 2001, the biennial meeting of states 7 in the outcome report, states adopted by consensus 2 factual, also again 2 references to ammunition, 1 reference to the group of governmental experts process in 2020-2021 on conventional ammunition, and also an acknowledgement that some states apply provisions of the POA to small arms and light weapons ammunition. So there has been progress made on this relationship between small arms and their ammunition over the past decades. Next slide, please. Now, I would like to say a few words about the Security Council and how the Security Council has addressed ammunition in its discussions. Traditionally, it has included weapons and the associated ammunition. The reports of the SG to the Security Council on small arms have adopted a comprehensive approach to small arms and light weapons, including its ammunition. In 2 of the thematic resolutions on the topic of small arms, the Security Council has also addressed associated ammunition. And ammunition is often included in arms embargo regimes and addressed in conjunction with matters relating to weapons that arise in the context of thematic agenda items, including on protection of civilians, security sector reform, and disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. Weapons and ammunition management is also increasingly included in mandates of peace operations. You see here on the slide a list of the peace operations that have a mandate or have provisions on weapons and ammunition management in their resolutions. So while the General Assembly has separated the discussions on small arms and those on ammunition, the Security Council has taken a much more comprehensive approach. And that leads me to the next slide on General Assembly action on conventional ammunition. And this dates back to 2004, when Bulgaria, France, Germany, and the Netherlands jointly sponsored a decision to include an item entitled "Problems Arising from the Accumulation of Conventional Ammunition Stockpiles and Surplus" in the provisional agenda of the General Assembly. And this then paved the way for a more comprehensive and constructive discussion on conventional ammunition under General Assembly auspices. In 2005, the resolution Problems Arising from the Accumulation of Conventional Ammunition Stockpiles and Surplus was then introduced. And in that resolution, the Secretary General was requested to seek views of member states regarding the risk arising from the accumulation of conventional ammunition stockpiles and surplus, and that led to 2 reports that contained those views of member states, which were published in 2006 and 2007. Further resolutions on that agenda item were adopted, first on an annual basis and then subsequently on a biannual basis. Next slide, please. This leads us to the first group of governmental experts. So in resolution 61/72, the GA requested the Security Council to establish a group of governmental experts to consider further steps to enhance cooperation on conventional ammunition stockpiles and surplus, which convened in 2008. So that's the first GGE. The establishment of this GGE marked the most significant development related to ammunition since the studies and the reports of the late 1990s that were focused mostly, as I said, on small arms and light weapons. While the mandate of the GGE was limited to surplus stockpiles, the GGA was able to approach the ammunition issue more comprehensively and concluded that the problem of its accumulation in surplus of conventional ammunition in surplus was largely a result of inadequate stockpile management. Next slide, please. And therefore, the group recommended that surplus accumulation be considered within a broader framework of whole life management. What is important is that while considerations of security issues were reflected in the report, the group focused principally on safety aspects of stockpile management. It concluded that states and national initiatives should focus on priority areas, including greater cooperation and assistance, more education and training of national ammunition stockpile management staff, and improved knowledge management on ammunition technical areas within the UN. Next slide, please. In terms of global recommendations, the group recommended that the UN would develop ammunition technical guidelines. In response, the UN launched in 2011 the first version of the International Ammunition Technical Guidelines. The group also recommended that the UN establishes a knowledge management platform to support states in the safe and secure management of their ammunition stockpiles. And this would lead to the establishment of the UN Safeguard Program. And then thirdly, the group also recommended that safe and secure conventional ammunition management be part of the planning and conduct of peace operations. And that recommendation has been addressed with the development of a weapons and ammunition management policy, and also a UN manual on ammunition management, which was developed by the Department of Peace Operations and the Department of Operations Support. And this third recommendation is also promoted with a joint DPO ODA initiative on weapons and ammunition management in DDR processes. Next slide, please. Over the years, the central recommendations of the 2008 GGE have been implemented and then also have been welcomed by the General Assembly in subsequent resolutions. And then in 2017, by resolution 7255, the GA requested the SG to convene a second group of governmental experts in 2020, which is preceded by an informal consultation process to identify urgent issues pertaining to the accumulation of conventional ammunition stockpiles in surplus. And next slide, I won't go into the details on the deliberations or the outcomes of this GGE, as we have the chair of the GGE, Markus Bleinroth, with us today, who will provide a more detailed overview. Just to say that the group adopted a final report by consensus, which was submitted to the 76th session of the GA and can be found under the document A/76/24. Let me just highlight that the group adopted a very comprehensive approach to understanding the safety and security risk posed by conventional ammunition. And unlike the 2008 GGE, the 2020-2021 GGE considered in further detail the security aspects of ammunition. It made also important recommendations, which Markus Bleinroth will present in a few minutes. Next slide, please. Following the conclusion of the GGE, the General Assembly welcomed its report in the latest resolution, which is 76233, and decided to establish an open-ended working group to elaborate a set of political commitments as a new global framework that will address existing gaps in through-life management, including international cooperation systems, and that will be part of a comprehensive framework at the national, sub-regional, regional, and global levels. The General Assembly also decided that the open-ended working group shall take into account the recommendations in the GGE report. Next slide. The open-ended working group was mandated to hold a 2-day organizational session, which took place in February 2022. It will convene for a 5-day session, 2 5-day sessions in 2023, and for 1 5-day session in 2023, and is preceded by informal consultations, also and with the contribution of relevant international and non-governmental organizations. The group is expected to submit its report on its work, including recommendations on a set of political commitments, to the General Assembly in its 78th session. Next slide. During the organizational session, member states adopted a provisional agenda, which will run through the 3 substantive sessions and the items of which you can see here. Agenda item 5, sub-items A to E, seek to take stock of the current state of play and to undertake a gap analysis, as well as to address the observations and recommendations of the 2020-2021 GGE. And this includes issues related to safety and security, existing global, regional, and sub-regional processes, and existing international cooperation and assistance mechanisms. The open-ended working group will also consider the recommendation of the GGE for a comprehensive framework on conventional ammunition, and then sub-item F will allow for the open-ended working group to elaborate a set of political commitments as a new global framework. All documents of the open-ended working group can be found on the website at the UNODA meeting place, which I can share in the chat in a few minutes. And maybe just a slide in conclusion. Let me stress that, next slide, please. Let me stress that over the past years and decades, important progress has been made on stockpile management, including through the development of the ITG and the establishment of the Safeguard program. But despite this, conventional ammunition still remains kind of the orphan of conventional arms control without a dedicated international policy forum or for regular exchange, or without a regulatory framework. The 2 GGEs provide an important foundation with important assessments and recommendations, as we have seen today and also will further discuss today. And building on that work, the open-ended working group is an important opportunity to more comprehensively address the safety and security challenges of ammunition, and to address existing regulatory gaps by elaborating the set of political commitments as a new global framework. And with this, I thank you very much for your attention of a rather lengthy presentation, and hand back to Paul. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Algaya, and no need to apologize. You had to provide a comprehensive introduction to many different UN forums that have addressed different aspects of the through-life management of conventional ammunition, especially in relation to small arms and light weapons, but also, as you mentioned, peace operations. And you gave us, I think, an excellent overview of the origins and progress towards the open-ended working group to look after this, as you put it, the orphan of the conventional arms and ammunition world. And I think you gave us an excellent foundation on which to proceed. I'd just like to remind all of the participants in today's meeting that you can post questions for any aspects of Ms. Alguer's intervention or going beyond it using the Q&A function located at the bottom of your screens. Please don't feel you have to wait until all panelists have given their presentations before posing your questions to any of them in turn. We now will hear from Mr. Manuel Martinez Morales. Manuel is UNIDIR's liaison officer in New York and also a colleague of mine in the Conventional Arms and Ammunition Program as a researcher. As the liaison officer in New York, he supports the work of UNIDIR by increasing the Institute's visibility and impact, building networks and partnerships, and contributing to the identification of new opportunities and resources. And in addition, working with me and my colleagues in the Conventional Arms and Ammunition Program, he coordinates the Preventing Armed Conflict and Armed Violence portfolio, and he also leads our work supporting the multilateral process on conventional ammunition, including supporting the latest group of governmental experts, as Nora just mentioned, from 2022 to 2021, and he'll continue this support through the open-ended working group of this year and next year. Apologies. Before joining UNIDIR, Manuel worked for several years on peace and disarmament issues at the United Nations Regional Center for Peace, Disarmament and Development in Latin America. And he'll be addressing the question, where are we, by providing a gap analysis on conventional ammunition. So Manu, we've heard about the orphan, and we're looking forward to you telling us how to take care of this particular child. Please, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Paul. And good morning and good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here today with you. As Paul said, I had the opportunity to participate as an advisor to the DG chair and now to the open-ended working group chair. And I'm also part of the roster of experts validated on the IETGs. So that means that I've been working in ammunition for the last 5 to 6 years. So the issue is very close to my professional heart, at least. And yeah, I really would like to see how we can all collectively take care of the orphan of conventional arms control. So today I'd like to structure my presentation in 3 sections. First, I would like to provide a bit of background to help understand where UNIDIR's research is coming from. Second, I would like to share the results of our research in the form of a gap analysis, focusing on findings and opportunities in 4 areas: ammunition security, ammunition safety, international cooperation and assistance, and frameworks. And once I've done that, I would conclude by sharing what I think are my 10 key takeaways. So next slide, please. So in the last 4 years, UNIDIR has conducted and participated in dozens of ammunition-related meetings, field missions, informal consultations, regional outreach. And in addition to that, we organized 3 thematic seminars to identify key issues and processes relevant to the safe and secure management of ammunition. In these technical discussions, we had more than 200 experts from states, regional and international organizations, colleagues from the UN, think tanks, specialized organizations, and industry and independent experts. And the findings that I will be presenting here today are, of course, the result of all these interactions with all these experts working on ammunition management. Also, you can find them published online in our thematic seminar reports, and all of them are available in English, French, and Spanish. As well as in our publication called Conventional Ammunition Management Gap Analysis, which is a synthesis of our findings. Yeah, next slide. Next slides. There we go. So let's see what we found. The first area in our gap analysis focuses on security aspects of conventional ammunition. And in that regard, diversion of ammunition is an enabling and contributing factor for insecurity and escalation of armed violence. But also at the same time, conflict, instability, and financial gains are some of the common causes for diversion. So in terms of findings, our research showed that beyond stockpiles, diversion can happen in many ways. via false documentation, via illicit brokering, via unauthorized transfers to non-state end users, and it could happen at the time of manufacture, during transportation, during operations or training, while in storage, during disposal processes, and it also could be aggravated by factors such as poor physical security and ineffective ammunition management practice. Therefore, we can say that stockpiles remain one of the key sources of safety and security risks and the impacts, the human impacts associated to them, but they are not the only one. And in this sense, what we found is that the application and uptake and use of the international ammunition technical guidelines remains key to address stockpile security. But at the same time, it is also important to focus on other things. For example, the links between physical security and stockpile management and pre-transfer risk assessments, or the links with diversion analysis or understanding better how diversion happens with diversion monitoring activities to ensure that there's effective responses in each of these areas. Now, one of our key findings was that it would be essential to better understand diversion. And to do that, we need to be able to identify and differentiate the existing types of diversion in a given context. So a typology of diversion is important because some areas of diversion can be addressed nationally, but others require coordination and coordinated efforts among states. Therefore, enhancing our understanding of diversion in different contexts remains an important factor that could help identify the right responses. Now, in terms of opportunities, we found that a top-down approach to ammunition security was necessary to provide direction from the highest level of government to the personnel responsible for the delivery of military capability or the operational units and the storage areas. We also found that, as mentioned before, pre-transfer risk assessments are a key security element, and they had to be done and performed with a view to identifying essential control steps and measures at the national level. And those steps or measures could include the development of risk indicators, the identification of sources of information, the implementation of end user control systems and related end user or end use documentation, the use of verification and information exchange mechanisms between states, and of course, the verification and authentication of the related documentation. In addition, in terms of security, we also found that transferring knowledge and building capacity is important to improve security. So in this one, I think fences are good at marking boundaries and protecting the stockpiles, but they need to be monitored. They need to be patrolled, right? So our research showed that practical and simple security measures can be very effective. And sometimes investing in people rather than in expensive technologies could really pay off. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of safety of conventional ammunition, our research showed that there's a need to manage and reduce the risks related to safety to prevent unplanned explosions at munition sites, because particularly unsafe and unserviceable ammunition, and because of their explosive nature, it presents a high risk to people and to infrastructure. So in terms of findings, one obvious finding is that unsafe ammunition is very costly. You can also think about not only the amount of resources needed to keep it safe, but also what happens if it explodes, right? And in terms of improving safety conditions, there are two basic approaches that should be considered. First, to reduce the risk of an accidental explosion occurring in the first place. And second, to mitigate the effects on the impacts of an accidental explosion should it occur. In addition to that, ammunition surplus was considered by experts as a byproduct of a well-functioning ammunition management system, and therefore the determination of surplus by having a well-functioning ammunition management system is key to reducing the safety risks. And on top of that, again, utilizing and giving proper use to the IATGs is fundamental to achieving safe stockpiling of ammunition. Now, in terms of opportunities, what we learn is that a targeted approach is important. It is crucial to focus on reducing the highest risks, bearing in mind the capacity of the state in question. So, yeah, targeted approaches, depending on where the risks are identified through the risk assessment, are the way to go to reduce safety risks. And it is essential that excess and serviceable stockpiles be considered as liabilities instead of considered as assets. So a greater detail of technical guidance could and should be developed in the areas of unclassified ammunition, surveillance and proof testing, and also in terms of self-life information. And finally, experts stated that if there were only one thing that could be done to improve safety and ensure safety, is better understanding and applying explosive quantity distances and net explosive quantities calculations, including in peace operations. Now, in terms of international cooperation and assistance, historically and predominantly, it has been focused on PSSM. So what we found is that the IATGs are the main tool to support that part, the work on stockpiles, but if they are applied in isolation, they will not address all the dimensions of safety and security, including the different sources of ammunition diversion that result from different weaknesses and a number of weaknesses along the supply chain. So it is essential to sustain efforts to encourage uptake and use of the IATGs, with particular efforts placed on long-term programming, sensitization, and the development of sustainable ammunition technical expertise at the national level. And then in terms of opportunities, national ownership and long-term relationships among actors are key, including through the development of national action plans and training plans. A part of that, more attention on pre-transfer risk assessments and diversion monitoring is necessary. And there are useful frameworks that could be used. For example, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Action 22 of the SDGs Agenda for Disarmament. Now, next slide. In our, let's say, last area of analysis, in terms of frameworks, as Nora and Paul rightly mentioned, ammunition has been described as the orphan of conventional arms control frameworks. And it is true that there are ammunition control measures present in a certain number of international and regional instruments, but they are very fragmented and limited in scope and in application. So this makes it difficult to mobilize political action, and of course poses challenges for international cooperation and assistance. However, the fact that there is an existence of some regional and sub-regional frameworks, even though they have gaps, they could provide a foundation, and some states would be able to utilize and leverage the regional instruments to drive national considerations for ammunition management. And then in terms of opportunities, this will mean that regional approaches could support states toward a wider political objective, both at the national level, but also at the multilateral level. And the comprehensive roadmaps at the regional level could provide a good basis for new approaches to ammunition management and ammunition control. However, what we found as well was that the value of replicability may need to be explored by each region or sub-region, given the different contexts and realities. And of course, the regional angle would be quite relevant and important for addressing the illicit trafficking of ammunition. So next slide, please. Then we are about to conclude, but I would like to share my, let's say, 10 key takeaways. First, the scope of ammunition issue is global, and then safety and security challenges are faced by every state. Second, the international nature of the issue goes beyond national borders, so coordinated responses are essential, both in conflict and non-conflict settings. And third, existing frameworks, even when they are implemented, they are not being able to fully address existing security and safety risks. Many previous processes on ammunition have covered PSSM, including the guidance, but not more than that. And research indicates that voluntary operational tools could address some of the risks related to safety and security within stockpiles, but not the risks associated across the supply chain. Some framework covers small arms and light weapons, but not more than that. And research also indicates, and the reality indicates, that conventional ammunition, not only small arms and light weapons ammunition, pose a security and safety threat, for example, in the case of IEDs. And frameworks, when they exist, they are fragmented, and this has an impact on implementation. Next slide, please. In addition, a comprehensive framework at the international level could, let's say, cascade down into regional, sub-regional, and national action, and that will help establish adequate national systems. So in my view, this could be an opportunity for the open-ended working group to articulate an effective framework. And based on the research, we see that framework should consider principles of commitments, but also technical blocks, both for safety and security, and a strong implementation mechanism to support operationalization. Apart from that, the 2008 GGE and the ITGs are a very, very technical and authoritative document, but there's a need to make an extra push to ensure their effectiveness. And we also need to be mindful that even if the IDEs are applied, but they are applied in isolation, we will be missing part of the problem. So next slide. It is important then to situate physical security and stockpile management into a wider system. As I mentioned, supply chain security is key. And to improve security, it is important to understand where the weaker points of the ammunition control system are, and diversion analysis activities could provide this information. And if they are well designed and conducted consistently, that could be part of the solution to this problem. But currently they are underdeveloped and need further analysis and thinking. And finally, the GG report provides for everyone a substantive roadmap with technical recommendations for the open-ended working group to seize the opportunity and fill a gap in conventional arms control. And I hope that member states have the opportunity and also the responsibility to find a home for the orphan of the conventional arms control. And I think with this, I thank you everyone for your attention, and I'll give it to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Manuel, for your presentation and the introduction to some of the key findings of UNIDI's research regarding security safety aspects of ammunition management, and also the cooperation and assistance dimension at the international level, and then the useful indication with regard to existing regional, sub-regional, other multilateral frameworks. I think that was very helpful to follow on from a presentation by Ms. Algaya. 10 key takeaways. I think that's quite a lot for people to take on board. So I think we can propose to sort of share some of the presentations, both by Ms. Algaya and by yourself. But I think what you did is identify some really key areas for consideration by the open-ended working group, and as you put it, to fill the gap. And so I think that's a very useful segue into the final of today's three presentations and panelists. I'll say again, though, before introducing Mr. Markus Breinroth, if you have any questions following this presentation, please post your questions using the Q&A function. You can also do it during the final presentation. I can promise you that if you get your questions in now, they're more likely to be answered, as time always escapes us in these virtual formats. Today's third contribution will be delivered by Mr. Markus Breinroth, who's already been introduced to you several times in previous presentations. He was the chair of the group of governmental experts on problems arising from the accumulation of conventional ammunition stockpiles in surplus, which took place during 2020 and 2021. Mr. Breinroth is now the Deputy Permanent Representative of Germany to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. And I know many participants are very much looking forward to your intervention on the work of the GGE and how you've brought us towards the open-ended working group. And with that, no further ado, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well. I'm having some internet issue. Can you hear me well? Okay, well, excellent. So, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, I would like to thank wholeheartedly UNIDIR for organizing today's webinar and for giving me the opportunity to present the report of the UN Group of Governmental Experts on Ammunition, which I had the honor to chair in 2020 and 2021. The outset, let me begin by pointing out the highly sensitive nature of ammunition. Ammunition is the direct fuel for conflict, terrorism, and organized crime, even more than small arms and light weapons. If you get control over ammunition, you can reduce the pervasive effects of conflicts and armed violence around the world, even if many weapons are available. As Nora Algaya has underlined, the issue of regulating conventional ammunition has been very controversial in the UN for decades. Since there was no consensus to integrate ammunition into the UN Programme of Action on SALT, regulating ammunition has been a key gap in conventional arms control at the UN level since the creation of the UN Programme of Action on SALT back in 2001, or as it has been labeled here previously, regulating conventional ammunition can be seen as the orphan of arms control. In 2008, Germany chaired a first UN group of governmental experts on the issue of conventional ammunition stockpiles in surplus. The group's recommendations led to the development of the International Ammunition Technical Guidelines, the IATGs, in 2011, as has been pointed out previously. The IATGs provide technical guidance at UN level for ammunition safety and to a certain extent also security within stockpiles. What is missing, however, is an overall policy framework and technical guidance for ammunition security throughout the supply chain. Both are needed for sustained political buy-in and in order to comprehensively address the challenges on the ground with regard to international interconnectivity of traffickers and organized crime. With the first GGE and the creation of the IATGs, in a way, we did the second step before the first by creating technical guidance without having a dedicated international framework to comprehensively address ammunition control. This is why Germany in 2017 took the initiative to call for a second UN group of governmental experts to address the challenges posed by ammunition management in a more comprehensive manner. The GGE was agreed by the UN General Assembly by consensus with the resolution 7255, problems arising from the accumulation of conventional ammunition stockpiles in surplus. The resolution mandated the UN Secretary General to convene the GGE in 2020. To prepare the GGE, as Manuel Martinez has pointed out, we conducted informal consultations as the lead sponsor of the resolution, both in New York and regionally. So we did a total of, I think, 6 seminars in New York and also in Geneva. As presented before, we held 3 seminars with the help of UNIDAR in Geneva and New York, with a total of 200 participants to develop substantive ideas for the GGE in a participatory manner and open to all UN member states. I think this was a very unique feature of this GGE to start with such a preparatory phase and to give so many stakeholders the chance to bring inputs into the work of the GGE. In these consultations, it became clear that the GGE needed to address the whole life cycle of ammunition management, that the greatest challenges remain on the security side, namely with regard to the illicit proliferation of ammunition into terrorism, armed conflict, and organized crime. So this was the main challenge, and this is the focus of the GGE on the one side, but on the other side, it's also the overarching new framework that the group has proposed. The first session of the GGE took place in January 2020 in New York. The group was composed of a total of 18 members with full gender parity. I think also this was an innovative approach, and the usual geographic diversity, mirroring the UN community. Due to the pandemic, the GGE's work was switched to one informal online session in April 2020, and was then concluded with 2 sessions in a blended format, so in a hybrid format in May in Geneva and in September in 21 in New York. So you can see that the pandemic was a challenge to the group, but we persisted, and with some delay, we were able to conclude the work in spite of all the challenges that faced the GGE. The composition of the group reflected the highly diverse views among UN member states on the issue. Nevertheless, and in spite of the challenges of the pandemic, it was possible to build up a high degree of cohesion among the group's members. This permitted to review even the most controversial issues in a depoliticized and constructive atmosphere, and to develop forward-looking proposals in the 33-page GGE report that should have the potential to be acceptable to all UN member states. Let me summarize the main recommendations of the report. The key recommendation is to establish a new global comprehensive framework on conventional ammunition at UN level as the overarching policy instrument. Within this framework, a set of political commitments should be negotiated under the auspices of the UN General Assembly. These political commitments should address both safety, which is the risk of explosion of ammunition, including stockpile management, and security, which is the risk of diversion, proliferation, misuse, aspects of through-life ammunition management from the point of production until disposal or use. The set of political commitments should, on the one hand, identify and promote relevant safety and security measures to be applied at specific stages of the through-life management of ammunition. These stages are production, pre-transfer, transfer, stockpile, recovery, use, and disposal. To guide states on this matter, the GGE report already identified 14 specific technical micro recommendations to reduce safety risks and 20 specific technical micro recommendations to reduce security risk. You can all find them in the report. On the other hand, identify and promote measures that are designed to monitor and enhance the effectiveness at all stages of the through-life management of ammunition, including the surveillance and incident investigations and record keeping on the safety side, investigation and analysis of diverted ammunition, and international cooperation in investigations to address diversions on the security side. A major point in our discussion was the divergence of views with regard to possible legally binding provisions as part of the new instrument. Some members saw this as a necessary condition for achieving any meaningful progress on the ground. Others were in clear opposition against any legally binding elements. The compromise we struck was to recommend politically binding commitments for the global framework at UN level, while shifting the implementation of the new instrument to the regional and/or the sub-regional level. At the regional sub-regional level, the global level political commitments and measures could be translated into legally binding instruments determined by each region or sub-region on a voluntary basis corresponding to their respective needs. But it wouldn't have to. It could also be politically binding. It could be legally binding, but it could not. That's up to the respective region or sub-region. So it doesn't have to be, let's say, Africa. It could also be West Africa. So that's regional versus sub-regional. The GGE recommended that the political commitments would be complemented by an implementation mechanism at the global level composed of the following elements: the facilitation of international cooperation and assistance to support states in their implementation efforts and to ensure needs-based and tailored operationalization of standards, guidelines, and best practices. The development of voluntary operational guidelines related to the security aspects of the through-life management of ammunition under the auspices of the UN, so the supply chain technical guidelines for the security side, to complement the already existing international ammunition technical guidelines, the ITG, on the safety side. So we already have the ITG, as was explained before by my previous speakers, and there would be a creation of new technical guidelines for the security side, since the ITJ mainly referred to the safety side. And then supporting of the voluntary adoption at the national, regional, and sub-regional levels of targets or indicators, and identify opportunities to support information exchange among states. So I think that's also a new element, a very innovative element, to have targets, to set targets, and to have indicators measuring how these targets are being reached. Then the development of an online repository of regional, sub-regional, and national political commitments. And finally, the facilitation of participation in regular meetings of states to follow up and exchange information on implementation efforts. So that's what will be part of the new global framework, these regular meetings. We also added a recommendation to base regional or sub-regional implementation on structured strategic processes with possible performance indicators as a joint effort of states, donors, and implementing agencies. The model we were thinking of with this recommendation is the Western Balkans Comprehensive Self-Control Roadmap, led by UNDP-CSAC as the secretariat, together with the EU, France, and Germany. For the national level, the report recommends to address ammunition management in a comprehensive and sustainable manner by developing legal and regulatory frameworks and undertake projects and programs that effectively address safe and secure through-life ammunition management from the point of manufacture until it's disposable, so the whole life cycle. States should develop national systems to monitor and prevent diversion. These systems could include ammunition identification, profiling, tracing, and analysis, data collection, and record-keeping mechanisms for information sharing and exchange mechanisms, knowledge generation and capacity building, export controls, input controls, and post-delivery assurances. The report places its recommendations in the context of the Agenda 2030 and calls upon states to consider the link between sustainable, safe, and secure through-life ammunition management and security sector governance and reform. It also encourages the full involvement of both women and men in decision-making and implementation processes, as well as mainstreaming gender into policies and practice. As Nora Algay has already indicated, the report can be found at UNODA's website in all languages of the UN. The report was welcomed in the fall last year by the UN General Assembly Resolution 76/233. The resolution encourages states to consider the GGE recommendations and decide to establish an open-ended working group to elaborate a set of political commitments, decides to establish an open-ended working group to elaborate a set of political commitments as a new global framework that will address existing gaps and through-life ammunition management at the national, sub-region, regional, and global levels. So, dear colleagues, to conclude, small and light weapons are regularly characterized as the real weapons of mass destruction, as they kill about 500,000 people every year. Ammunition is the oxygen of these weapons of mass destruction, No weapon can kill without ammunition. The GGE proposals aim at strengthening the authorities of states to more effectively control ammunition against diversion to terrorists, insurgents, organized crime, and others, as well as enhancing safety. I hope the GGE's work will contribute consensus to better control ammunition to make the world a better place. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Blamroth, for your excellent presentation, introducing to us not just innovation in the format of the meetings that took place during 2020 and 2021 for the GGE, but also how this enabled a very creative process and set of proposals for the global framework and this multi-level approach that you've proposed, and in particular the encouragement and the focus on cooperation and assistance at these different levels, and the inclusion of targets and indicators for success. I think you shared there a lot of useful proposals and issues. I think that we're confident or hopeful that the open-ended working group will carry forward towards putting that framework into place. And I see that the three presentations we've have stimulated a lot of questions already. So thank you so much to all the participants that have put forward some very interesting proposals, questions, and queries. We have some adequate time, I think, to try and address them. I think what I'll do is I'll start with a couple of general ones and invite our three panelists in turn to respond. And then I'll pick up on a couple of very specific ones that are addressed to particular panelists. So we'll have two rounds of questions. The first set of questions I think relate to some key issues that we've had. So I just saw, for example, the question around the relationship with existing instruments was addressed by a couple of our speakers at the regional and sub-regional level, but I've seen the reference to the Firearms Protocol and the Arms Trade Treaty that deal with different aspects of through life management of ammunition. And therefore, I'd invite each of the speakers, the panelists in turn, to share their views on where they see the framework coming into accord with these existing frameworks. There's also a question with regards to the difference between the terms weapons and ammunition management, WAM, physical security and stockpile management, PSSM, and stockpile management and security. And this is something I think, again, that several of the panelists are probably in a good position to respond to. And therefore, I think I'll leave it with those two questions to begin, and then I'll come back with a second round. So I think we'll go in reverse order. So Marcus, if you have any thoughts, seeing as you steered the process and have clearly identified some of the gaps and the ways in which this new process and this new framework rather would align with what's already in existence at the multilateral level, not just the regional. And then Manu, I think that you're probably best placed to talk about the WAM definitions as well as your thoughts on the gaps. And then Nora, I'll turn to you as the final one to respond in this first round. So back to you, Mr. Blamroth.
Thank you very much, Paul. So in the course of the GGE and also prior to the GGE in the informal consultations we had with the help of UNIDIR and our open-ended consultations that we run in New York and Geneva, we examined to which extent ammunition management and regulating ammunition was present in other global instruments, both global, you mentioned the firearms program and others, and regional, SIFTA and others. And we concluded in this that ammunition there was a patchwork of ammunition management throughout a number of instruments, but it was not really pertinent. So it did not really cover the gap. And there was no overarching framework to focus on ammunition. And as I said in my speech, ammunition is quite central in the way that without ammunition, there's no conflict. So it really is the oxygen of conflict, and it really merits a much closer look. It has been, as I also said in my speech, this has been tried to do this within the UN Program of Action, but it failed for various reasons. States were concerned that this would not be adequate from their national point of view. to treat small light weapons together with ammunition. And in complementing what Nora Algeier has said on the history, let me point out one more fact. The ITI, so the International Tracing Instrument report back in 2005, already concluded that on ammunition management, there should be a separate process. So this was already consensus back in 2005, but just nobody took it up. The first GGE in 2008 took up the subject, but did not move to the sensitive question of creating a separate track on regulating ammunition. And if you carefully trace how ammunition was treated, on what kind of regulatory impact the different existing instruments, both globally and regionally, on ammunition have, you will see that it remains relatively limited and doesn't really do the job. So therefore, and as I said, because ammunition has such a key role as the oxygen of conflict, it was particularly sensitive. So in my personal explanation, I think this is the reason why it wasn't possible to take it up for all these years. This consensus back in 2005 to create a separate process. It did last until 2017 when we started exploring the issue. And I can tell you from this experience of having sort of tried to move this forward, it was not easy. But it did work. So back in 2017, with a lot of groundwork, preparatory groundwork, we were able to launch this idea to have another GGE. And there was a consensus several times in 2017 and again in 2019 on the resolution, and on the resolution for the OEGW, creating the OEGW. There was also a consensus. Nobody voted against in this sense. So we were able, with all the effort that we put in, as I said, 3 seminars with 200 participants, regional consultations throughout the globe, from Latin America, Caribbean, Africa, Eastern Europe, Asia. We traveled quite a lot for this, to establish a way forward. And then in the GGE, again, it was a very delicate process of reconciling these divergent views, because, as I said, the GGE was composed in a way to mirror the differences of states in the UN, so that no state would feel that this GGE didn't really address the concerns that they have, even though it was a small group. So in a way, this group paved the way for a possible compromise also in the UN at large, with the ideas that you find in the report. And of course, these have to be discussed through, and this is just sort of one possible way forward. There may also be others, but I think what has been developed in this group is quite remarkable, because the individual experts from their countries really try to see what way forward is possible, and everybody in the group stretch their own positions on sensitive issues. Let's say, for instance, ammunition marking is such a very, very sensitive issue that we discussed at length, also with inviting experts to give a technical industry point of view on this, what is possible and what is not possible. So issues like this you will find in the micro recommendations that I mentioned in my presentation. You will find very interesting and new and innovative recommendations way forward that do stand for, let's say, compromises that are not the lowest common denominator. And I think this is what really characterizes this GGE report. We have really moved forward strategically to create a possible way forward for the UN to meaningfully regulate ammunition management, and in a way, by squaring the circle, which I described, the discussion we had, legally binding versus non-legally binding versus just politically binding, a very, very key issue. And by, let's say, by the proposal that we have to have the actionable level, where the regulation really takes place at the regional or sub-regional level, you can fine-tune this much more to what is effective for your sub-region or your region, and also what is politically feasible. So on which degree of regulation you can achieve consensus. Let's say West Africa, ECOWAS, is the only region or sub-region, I would call them a sub-region globally, that has legally binding provisions. And it was also representatives from this region who called for the absolute necessity of having legally binding provisions in order to meaningfully regulate ammunition management. But of course, others said this is totally unthinkable for us. So by shifting by having a global framework on the one hand, and on the other hand, having an actionable level, either regionally or below the regional level at the sub-regional level. So sub-region, I would refer to, for instance, to ECOWAS in West Africa, or to CARICOM in the Caribbean, or to the Western Balkans. By doing this, you can really fine-tune, and you can fine-tune to the degree that you need and that you find consensus for, which you couldn't do at the global level. But nevertheless, at the global level, you need not only the political commitments and the principles guiding action in a coherent way globally, but you also need to develop the voluntary operational technical guidance that we have in our report. The IATG, the International Ammunition Technical Guidelines, are an excellent example for this. They're voluntary, fully voluntary, but they can be very, very useful for states to develop their own systems, and they can base their own ammunition safety management on them. On the security side, there is nothing. So I think this is a gap that should be covered. And by having this, by complementing this, so having, let's say, the global framework, having an actionable level at regional, sub-regional level, and having the policy instrument of operational voluntary guidance, for instance, indicators and targets, or what I refer to the Western Balkan South Roadmap, which operationalizes this. Also, there's a CARICOM South Roadmap mirroring similarly this new model of, let's say, strategic cooperation between donors, recipients, and implementing agencies. In this new partnership, you can really make substantial progress. So in the case of the Western Balkan South Roadmap, for instance, there was an agreement to focus to implement 7 goals measured by 14 key performance indicators, and with a clear time horizon, 5 years, to bring the issue of illicit proliferation under full control. And that has really mobilized a lot of potential in the region, in the Western Balkans, to work together despite all the differences, and to enable progress. And I hope that in the Caribbean, the same is also happening, and other regions are also following this model. This is something that Germany and France have brought to the UN Security Council in open area consultation to showcase this new strategic cooperation. And I think this could also help implementing such, let's say, actionable levels at the sub-regional or regional level. So in a nutshell, I think the report offers a lot that goes far beyond the patchwork of some elements of regulation that you will find in the existing instruments, and brings it together in a one-stop shop that can really change things on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you've answered several questions in one, so thank you. That was fantastic. I'd now like to pass to Manuel for his response. At least I've seen the question around weapons ammunition management, Manu, but there's maybe others that I've seen that have just come in. So please feel free to address the couple of questions that I think are directed towards you.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I'll go first with the one on WAM and PSSM. Let's say that WAM, at least as it is defined by the UN and the unitary approach, is considered the oversight, accountability, and management of arms and ammunition throughout their whole life cycle. And this will include the establishment of frameworks, processes, practices, anything that could help providing more safety and security to the material acquisition, the stockpiling, the transfers, tracing or profiling, and disposal. And so the UN approach and UNIDIR's approach on WAMB is comprehensive, and it is comprehensive in 3 ways. First, it covers the full life cycle of weapons and ammunition to prevent diversion and misuse from production to final use, as I just said, but including disposal or even activities related to the investigation and understanding how the weapons and ammunition ended up in the hands of unauthorized users or when it is misused. But it is also comprehensive in terms of scope. It doesn't focus only in one type or category of weapons or ammunition. So it's not only about small arms and light weapons or firearms. It's also comprehensive in the sense that it includes other major conventional weapons like attack helicopters or let's say battle tanks and so on. And third, I think it's important to also explain that the approach is comprehensive in its level of application, because there's a lot of focus placed in those levels that Marcus was mentioning that the GG report also addressed. No, it is comprehensive because it tries to support the establishment of these practices at every level, at the multilateral level, at the regional level, and at the national level. Whereas physical security or PSSM is more targeted to one of those stages in the life cycle of the ammunition. Maybe I can very quickly also touch upon a question regarding how let's say ammunition process could help certain regions. There was one question in particularly referring to the ECOWAS region. And in my view, one of the things that we learned through our research process was that in those contexts where there was a lack of, let's say, implementation, the answer that we would get sometimes is that the lack of a multilateral framework or regional framework that could somehow cascade down and support national authorities in mobilizing action at the political level was one of the things that were missing. So in essence, this process could trigger this action from this top-down approach from the multilateral level to help put in place some mechanisms and measures at the regional and at the national level that could solve some of the issues that are being faced at the national level. And I'll stop here, also mindful of the time. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Manuel. You also touched upon, I think there's a question that was posed around whether the open-ended working group will address the issue of production. And I think you answered that response already there, although I'm not sure in the detail, the level of detail that was posed in the question, whether that's possible, but I think that the issue will be there. And finally, for this round, Nora, to you, I saw there's actually several questions in there that talk to your former position as well with regard to addressing the situation in post-conflict situations and ammunition with regard to sort of DDR and related processes. So it seems like you've also got some people who are reading your biography and not just the presentation. So I'll leave it to you to address those questions which you feel most pertinent at this stage. So please, the screen's yours.
Sure. Thanks so much, Paul. Maybe I just, before addressing the question on DDR, just on the filling the gaps question, and just to complement what Marcus has said, I think what is important to note is that the set of political commitments that the open-ended working group has been mandated to develop will be a political instrument similar to what the program of action was. So it's a global framework, and it would cover the entire through life management process from production to disposal and cover all categories of conventional ammunition. So if we compare that to some of the existing frameworks at the international level, such as those that have been quoted in the firearms protocol of the ATT, protocol is a legal instrument creating obligations for their states parties. So states parties need to ratify the firearms protocol, and it's only covering small arms ammunition, so not the entire part of the conventional ammunition categories. And then on the ATT, again, a legal instrument, a legal treaty covering ammunition as well, but covering a very specific part of the through life management, so the transfer of weapons and providing obligations in terms of the requirements for weapons and arms trade. So I think this is where there is still a gap, even if you have international instruments that are existing with regards to arms control. And then maybe I can address one of the questions with regards to ammunition stockpile management and how during armed conflict and also with regards to armed groups. First of all, in conflict affected states, I think what is important, diversion and theft from national stockpiles should be prevented by ensuring that the security of the ammunition depots is ensured. And this can be done by applying the international ammunition technical guidelines. And there's also need of efforts to prevent diversion to unauthorized users, including through diversion monitoring. And this obviously includes, this is beyond stockpile management. So at the international level, we actually, as also noted by the GGE, we don't have guidance and standards for these security-related aspects of through life management of ammunition. And then maybe also just with regards to questions regarding DDR, there have been international efforts, especially in the context of DDR processes, to include weapons and ammunition management in these processes, going beyond disarmament, including engagement with armed groups, including integration in community violence reduction programs to improve the safety and security of communities. Now, I think if we talk about engagement with armed groups on weapons and ammunition management, of course, this can be a sensitive subject and needs to be kind of evaluated on a case by case to also ensure to not promote military capabilities of armed groups, but to focus on confidence building and also on the safety and security of communities. But we're working more and more also in these contexts and to ensure that weapons and ammunition management in these DDR processes are conducted in accordance with international and regional arms control instruments and also in line with international guidance and standards that are available. I'll leave it at that. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you so much. So many questions have been answered in such a short space of time. So thank you to our three excellent panelists for doing that. I see that the time is against us. We've already used up our 90 minutes. So with that, I think what I'll do is I'll give each of the speakers just a final 60 seconds concluding remarks. And we'll start with you again, Ms. Algaya, then on to you, Manu, and then finally with Mr. Blumroth. So Nora, your final comments, thoughts as we close.
Thanks so much, Paul, also for moderating excellently these discussions. I think what came out very clearly in our discussion today is that the open-ended working group doesn't start from the scratch and really can tap into thorough observations and recommendations from two group of governmental experts, but also research and work that has been done by organizations such as UNIDIR over the past year. There's certainly hope that the open-ended working group will achieve to address the important identified gaps, such as the current lack of a regulatory framework at the international level. And also further work will be undertaking at the international level on security-related aspects beyond stockpile management. And I think as Manuel and also Marcus mentioned in their presentation, the political commitments at the global level could be the start for initiating the development of more targeted and tailored regional national frameworks to achieve a real impact on the ground. And I think this is what we are all thriving to achieve. So thanks again very much, UNIDIR, for organizing this and for inviting us to participate. Back to you, Paul.
much for your excellent interventions and also for the fantastic responses, and indeed the impact on the ground, I think is a very fitting way to wrap up your remarks. And with that, over to you, Manu, please.
Thanks, Paul. And yeah, I fully agree on this last part that Nora mentioned on the impact from the ground. We've discussed today about history, the process, UN discussion. We've discussed about research findings on processes and practices. But I think and the opportunity that we have in front of us. But I think to conclude, I would like to say that let's also be mindful all the time about the importance, the human importance of this issue, the impact that ammunition has in the battlefield, the impact that it has in the cities, the impact that it has in the communities. And don't forget about that, because we have with this process at the UN, we have an opportunity and a responsibility. But it is also urgent, because every day this is having a huge impact in the lives of thousands of people on the ground. So with that, I would like to conclude. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you so much. And now to you, Mr. Blumroth, I think it's appropriate that you have the final remarks, given that you brought us to this open-ended working group. So over to you for your final thoughts, please.
Thank you very much, Paul. Just in a nutshell, very quick responses to two questions that I think are important. One is the question by Maite Francois, why all this is so controversial and whether it's related to export-import. In this context, I would like to make it very clear, because I know that this has been one of the concerns in this relation, why it was so difficult to regulate ammunition. The recommendations that we have framed as a possibility to pave a way for consensus, the key aim is to empower states, to help states to deal with insurgent terrorists, etc. It's not to prevent exports or imports. So that must be very clear. Then the other question on what would this mean for West Africa? I think it would give West Africa a global perspective and global instruments and more strategic cooperation with donors. So just to bring these two things into relation, to conclude, I think Manuel has put this very ably in his speech. The hope on my side as chair and as the one who has for several years, lots of business trips, worked to make this this open-ended working group, and hopefully then also a GA decision on its recommendations possible. I hope that the GDE report will provide a substantive roadmap to guide your discussions, and to provide a fine middle line of where consensus is possible. And that with this, you will be able to develop a very meaningful result, and that this will hopefully find a good consensus in the General Assembly and pave the way for saving lives in the future with a much better ammunition management than we have it today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if we were meeting in person, this is indeed where I think I would ask you all as participants to express your appreciation for our three excellent panelists today, for not just sharing their extensive knowledge with you on the UN process on conventional arms to date, but I think helping to set a really solid foundation for the work that Mr. von Witzke and all of you will carry forward over the next couple of years in the open-ended working group. I'd also like to express my thanks to Ruben Nicoli and Mathilde Vecchione for their excellent work behind the scenes that I think has helped to ensure that this event has proceeded so smoothly. And on behalf of UNIDE's Conventional Arms and Ammunition Programme, I'd like to thank you all for attending today's event and for taking the opportunity to engage with our three panelists. Apologies that we weren't able to answer all of your questions, but as I've said, we've taken note of them and we'll carry them forward. Thank you also for staying with us beyond the 90 minutes. I know that we're all having Zoom fatigue, but I think it was a very stimulating discussion. I wish you all the best for the rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow at the same time to discuss ammunition management experiences from the ground as we continue our preparations for the open-ended working group on conventional ammunition. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.